best of our ability.
So there you have it, the chairman of the 9/11 Commission, former Governor Thomas Kean of New Jersey, and in addition, the vice chairman, the former Indiana congressman, speaking there for us just a moment ago, the vice chairman, Lee Hamilton. With us now from our Washington newsroom, Brit Hume, the host of Special Report and our managing editor. Brit, 24 hours ago, she said, I can't do this, the White House won't let me, the rules are such that I can't. 48 hours before that, she said this to 60 Minutes. I think we have a full screen to put up there, where, in fact, Condi Rice said it's a long-standing principle that sitting national security advisors do not testify before the Congress. Of course, this isn't the Congress, but Brit, what has changed?
Well, I think what's changed is that the pressure on this continued, and the story wouldn't go away. And the Democrats in Congress and elsewhere were making a lot of noise about it. And the White House had decided it had taken about all it was willing to take on this, despite the president's desire to try to reinstate some of the powers of the executive that he and the vice president in particular believe have been eroded, and they gave in. And I don't think there's much more to it than that.
Was their original argument, Brit, a legitimate one, especially given the fact that this isn't a committee of Congress? Far from it. In fact, no one is a sitting congressman here.
This investigation in its form and its conduct, in my view, having covered many, many, many of these over the years, has been almost indistinguishable from a standard congressional investigation. The members of the committee were all political persons of one kind or another. The level of grandstanding has been about the same as you would expect. The chairman himself, Vice Chairman Mr. Hamilton, was in here over the weekend. We were talking before he went on the air, and he was complaining about one of the Democratic members of the commission who had a 20-minute round to question George Tenet, and the person made a 16.5-minute statement that didn't have a question in it. So in all respects, this has looked very much like a standard congressional investigation, with all of the public posturing and preening that goes on in such an investigation, and with the political connections of each members. Half were appointed by Republican, half by the Democrats, and so on. So that's what it looks like. And the whole principle is related to Congress, Shep, but the idea is what you're trying to preserve is the ability and willingness of the people immediately around the president who work for him to speak to him candidly, even if they have radical ideas that they might not want to express publicly. That's the concept. That's what executive privilege is all about. And you have to wonder whether this doesn't tend to erode that, the sense that somehow, some way, what you say may end up on the front pages of the newspapers. And if you think that, you might not say it, and the president might not benefit from the advice.
I just wonder if the argument that they didn't want to set a precedent, and now it won't because they're stipulating such.
Oh, no, yeah, no, Shep, don't buy that. This is a precedent. I mean, you can't make it unhappen. It will happen. It will become a precedent of one kind or another. It may be limited in its effect by what everybody says about it, but once it's happened, it's happened.
Wasn't the precedent already set by Zbigniew Brzezinski and others? No?
No. Those issues, Zbigniew Brzezinski's testimony and those of other national security advisors, Sandy Berger and others, have been about other matters. They've been about criminal matters. The issue here is policy. What you're trying to protect is the freedom and openness of policy deliberations. In the case of Zbigniew Brzezinski, the president's brother, Billy Carter, was involved in a scandal, and there was some question about whether he might have broken the law by intervening with the U.S. government, President Carter's brother, by intervening with the U.S. government on behalf of Libya. It was a criminal matter. Criminal matters have in the past overridden executive privilege. But when it's purely a matter of policy, when Congress or someone else is investigating policy, these deliberations between the president and his aides have been considered privileged.
Of course, now they will also hear from the president and the vice president. And I know that some of these no transcripts, but detailed, copious notes of previous talkings, not testimony, because it wasn't unearthed, but those might be made public now. Do you have a sense whether the White House would be for such a thing, and what the president and vice president might face before this commission?
Well, a couple of things about that, Shep. It was one of the things that was intriguing about this news conference was you heard Tom Kean, the chairman, say at the beginning that one of the things they were hoping for is that Condi Rice would replicate the information that she has already given to the commission in private. They clearly don't expect her to change her story on any of the stuff she said during those 4 hours, which raises a question. Is the commission going to be hearing, for the most part, what it has already heard? And the answer to that has to be yes. The one area where she may break some new ground is in responding to the things that are in Richard Clarke's book, which she has disputed in public already, and about which she may be further questioned by members of the commission. But when you add it all up, you have to ask this question: to what end is the commission insisting on this open testimony? When she testifies, if it is to get information, the chances are that they've already gotten most of it, as the chairman said. If it is to rebut these charges made by Richard Clark, well, to some extent that she's done that in public, and I suppose they could question her in private. And if they're worried about whether it would all be under oath, I suppose she could give the testimony in private, make a transcript, and later have her sign the transcript under penalty of perjury. I mean, there are a lot of ways to do this. This is about the commission doing what commissions like this love to do, and that is carry on public hearings where the members can be on camera, and the whole profile of the undertaking is enlarged.
The White House has asked, Brit, that this take place in the first 2 weeks of April, so in the next 2 weeks, and the guessing is, at least for now, that the commission will go along with that.
Go ahead. I think the White House could have called the shots on that if it wanted to.
Sure.
But I suppose it decided if it was going to surrender, it might as well surrender completely.
You know what I wonder, Brit, is how many backdoor phone calls are happening right now about grandstanding that will certainly take place on one side and the other.
Well, Condi Rice is at a disadvantage here. She's already told her story to the commission. They basically know what she's going to say. So if she varies in any respect, even inadvertently, from what she said before, then they'll be all over her. So she's got a really tough situation. That's what congressional investigators like to do. They like to get you in ahead of time, question you, and then question you all over again in public and hope to trip you up. The one person I saw avoid that was Oliver North when he testified in the Iran-Contra hearings. He stalled and delayed and put them off for so long that they were up against their deadline when he finally agreed to testify, and then he refused to give them the pre-interview that they wanted. And when he came before the Joint Congressional Committee investigating Iran-Contra, let me put it this way, he ate their lunch.
But in this case, there is testimony on the record, for such as it is already. So I guess some in the committee, you're suggesting, may be looking for a slip-up here.
Oh, it's absolutely what they'll be looking for. And, you know, all things being what they are, you know, if you try to repeat in a 4-hour, you know, what you've said exactly in 4 hours, you may, you know, there'll be a nuance here and a nuance there. You might change just because of a matter of wording. That probably will get cleared up for the most part, but it does put her in a certain jeopardy.
I saw a poll, Brit, that said 70% of Americans were paying at least some degree of attention to what it was that Clark said. How worried is the White House about this, their #1 issue going into the political season?
Well, it's the #1 issue going into it's a premise of the president's administration. This is what he decided would be the purpose of his administration. And now comes this former employee who says that the president prior to 9/11 was inattentive to this issue, that nobody gave it much priority. And he describes the goings-on in the Bush administration in 8 months as somehow more negligent than what had gone on in the previous 8 years, much of it, or at least a lot of it, under his own direction. It's understandable that he would make that case, and it's also, I think, to some degree understandable that the administration would respond to it with some force, which is what has happened, and what has given this commission this delicious political controversy upon which it is now embarked.
And I'm quite sure we'll see it live right here. Brit Hume, our Washington managing editor on Capitol Hill for us. Brit, good to see you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Shep.
We'll see him tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern Time, 3 o'clock Pacific, for a fair and balanced political roundup of the day. And rest assured, the All-Stars will be talking about this one. Still to come from studio.